ashes burn in the snow on the night it's all worth right.
What is up, Star Wars Unlimited fans? It's Loopy here at Late Night Gaming, and we are here for the first Masterclass of Set 3. And we got two Masters joining us today. How you doing, gods? First
Doing
off,
great.
we're joined by Tatta, recently off a win at Columbus. Is that right?
Yep. Star City Games, 1K and 2K in Columbus, yeah.
You just like routinely crush Star City Games, don't you? It seems like you're always getting.
I have done well in Star City events, yes. I can't explain it. It just kind of happens. Won 2 in a row. Made top 8 of about all of them. They're really fun, and I just enjoy playing in them, and just happen to do well.
If the company files for bankruptcy, John Tatta is going to be the reason with all the prize checks written.
I doubt that. Their Magic events pay out far more than Star Wars, but yeah.
And then we're also joined with BobbySapphire from K.T.O.D. How are you doing?
Great. I'm actually going to my first SCG in about a month in Atlanta. Me and Tatta are going.
All right. Well, cool. Yeah, actually, I hear that you're traveling around a little bit for Set 3.
That is the first leg of my I hope to have a 6-stop tour during PQ season.
That sounds cool, and I very much hope that the World Tour hits Wisconsin, but I don't recommend February. Frankly,
yeah, you kind of talked me off that ledge, but you also reminded me that Adepticon moved to Wisconsin, which is something I've always wanted to go to, but didn't want to drive to whatever town that was in that the Adepticon used to happen at.
Yeah, I was in Illinois, and the Baird Center in Milwaukee is beautiful. I mean, they just spent a ton of money renovating that place, so I'm sure that the new venue will be good. So
yeah, I'm excited. It was like always an hour away from Chicago, so I was never gonna go because it was just too much like logistically to get me there.
All right, well, we'll look forward to that. So, tell me about Jango Tarkintown. I mean, this is the deck that kind of came right hot out of the gates in Set 3, caused in large part by you. Bobby, you actually ran it a week after the set release.
Yeah, the day after. I think that was just it. It was like I ran it the day after the store. My local store had a showdown the day after the set dropped, and we needed a deck. And it was easy to slot into the Boba Red shell because it did use a lot of the same cards, and I had practiced that a lot, and just in general TDR space decks. And I think like John and maybe Justin had been playing a couple games and just said like, yeah, it's good. We got some games. It seems great. I tried it. It seemed great and sleeved it up. And yeah, went undefeated at my showdown. Got to make a video about it, and then just kind of caught fire as being, first. That goes a long way. I don't think we invented the deck by any means, but when you get to make a video about how you did well at the very first event, then your foot kind of gets stuck in that cement. You get that footprint there.
Yeah. I don't know who brought it up first in our little team chat, but maybe it was me, maybe it was Justin, but we just were kind of trying to figure out what deck to start with for Set 3. And like Mike said, it's like, well, why don't we just take this Boba shell and just try it with Jango? And I think personally that the deck kind of flows better with Jango. Boba's incredibly broken. There's no debate. But in this shell, this was probably the weakest Boba deck. But it just kind of suits Jango a lot better, than I think it did Boba.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks to just how busted Boba was, where like my big issue with him was always that like whatever yellow leader you wanted, he was just going to be better. And now with him gone, we can actually build cohesive decks. And as we talk about this deck and as people play this deck, they're going to see that like the cohesion of how all these pieces work in tandem is like one of the most fun I've had playing the game, because the deck works in concert with everything the leader is supposed to do. And a lot of times this game is just like, oh, let me slap the best leader with the best 50 cards. But with Jango and Tarkintown and all these ping effects, we actually have like a real, like honest to goodness Star Wars Unlimited deck.
Yeah, and I think that it's one where at least you can make an argument where Jango might be better in some cases than Boba with this particular deck, with things like some P38 and some taps, here or there. So yeah, it's cool kind of see it come together now. So this was this a one-man show, whipping this thing up? Or how did you actually get ready for it the first time?
No,
Like building the
definitely
deck?
not.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a team effort. Like we just kind of threw the deck out. Like the very first version was probably terrible, and then we just kept tuning and testing, and the core, which we'll talk about, 40 to 45 cards were probably always the same, but you know, Wu and Alex both tested it quite a bit. They had some great ideas like Crafty Smuggler and the Flamethrower. Mike had some ideas, I had some ideas, and just all kind of came together.
Yeah, especially since that first weekend, like I had to sleeve something up, and you'll see when we start talking about the list, like the evolution of how like our first sort of approach of what was really good, and then how easily that was compatible by the meta. So we had to sort of evolve into what it is now, and what it will continue to evolve into as it continues to make sort of a mark on the meta and people prepare for it. Like now, I think it's one of the best decks, and I think people have to just take it into account when sleeving up, and so that means we have to take into account what people are going to do against us.
Yeah, there's no question about the results of it there, and I think that we'll be talking a lot about evolving a deck in the early part of a set, because that's something that we're going to have to do again and again and again. I mean, it's going to be 3 sets a year, and there's always going to be new time. But you guys are both principals or core members of K.T.O.D, which is a community that I love and am a part of too. Why don't you tell me about that and how it relates to kind of the deck brainstorming and working? Because I know there's a lot of that happens.
Yeah.
I'll
let Mike take this one. I'm just the guy, behind the curtain. So
yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting because like even people do not understand like the full structure, because the K.T.O.D is like a podcast with me and my friends Justin and Steve, my brother Maddie, but then we also have a team, like a tournament team that we sponsor and put together with people that like we're friends with and want to work with, including John and Wu and Alex Blandon, who John already mentioned, and our other teammate and friend from the Destiny days, CJ Monroe, Chrono. So there's the 8 of us, and we practice together and we build together. And then we're also in the greater K.T.O.D Discord, which is now up to over 1,300 people. It's at 1,308 paid subscribers right now, which is a really vast community of competitive-minded people that are all working all the time. There's actually an 8-man. There's actually a
12-man, I think.
There's a 12-man tournament going on in the Discord right now. Chrono is streaming in the Discord in another channel and taking place in the tournament. So like, it's crazy. The community has just built up, and there's very little toxicity. You mentioned Loopy when we were just chatting before that like the paywall does keep the trolls out. They're not willing to pay like the price of a cup of coffee a month to troll us. So they're like,
most of them aren't anyway.
There was not a single like, if you can imagine this, there's an online forum with over 1,200 people in October, and there was not a single election conversation anywhere in the Discord. Like there was nothing I had to police. There was nothing to worry about. It's just all people. The biggest arguments we have are like Wolf versus Tri-Fighter. Like, do we want to play Quinlan or do we want to play Anakin? Like, these are the discussions that we have. It's great. And it's all people who want to play cards. And, John streams in the Discord every week. We have these deck threads. There's a thread for every leader you could want to play. And we're all in there engaging with the community, working on decks and posting lists and figuring out how to win games against, the perceived meta. It's awesome.
Yeah, and if you're ever wondering, like, is it worth it? Like, you just look at the results from the events and the PQs, and as they come in, it's like, top 8s are like 3-4 people from the Discord. Every other winner is someone from the Discord, and it just shows, how great the deck threads are and how great everyone is.
And we're all tagging each other too in the event results, and you see like, oh, and like even at live events, there's obviously you want to win, but it's it's friendly rivalry.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of people from all sorts of teams there. I mean, there's the K.T.O.D guys, but I mean, I think that it is exactly what you said. That I mean, I get a little overwhelmed on the main Discord, which is a great service and a ton of information, but there's a lot. And there's a lot of people that maybe aren't advancing the discussion in a positive direction. And
we have people from European teams, Boston Network, like every team under the sun. They're there to like have high level conversations and get information. Like even just like being plugged into that large of a portion of the competitive meta gives you information. which can be a competitive advantage for other teams, even like beyond knowing like what the K.T.O.D team might be doing. There's all other teams talking about what they might be doing and how they're evolving their decks. So I just think all in all, it's a great place to chat about competitive unlimited and like get games and have people that you know are actually out there playtesting and not just talking out of their rear end.
Yep. And it's very easy. The deck threads are my favorite part, with maybe the exception of the movie club, which I'm a big movie club guy.
Yeah, well, I need someone to take that over because my bandwidth is shot.
We'll nominate some stuff for you, but yeah, just looking through now, I mean, there's a new post in the Mall Green forum. There's a new post in the Padme forums that we were looking at too. So people are cooking, and I think it's cool whenever you have these sets pop up and you see all the new ones there and you kind of follow what you try to. But can't commend you enough on how the community came together. I know that when it was starting up, I was probably a day one joiner of K.T.O.D because I was familiar with what Hyperloops had been. But,
yeah, and we appreciate it. We're actually coming up on 8 months with the Discord live this weekend.
And I mean, not only have you matched that, but you far surpassed that. I mean, I think it's just for a competitive community. It's really kind of cool, seeing what's happened. It kind of seems like it's autopiloting itself. You kind of have people.
I mean, I wake up every morning and just, thank the stars that we were lucky enough to have the support. It's definitely not on autopilot, though. I feel like I work 2 40-hour jobs.
There's that, and that's where this Jango deck came from. Was from the work having a K.T.O.D, right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the deck. We know it doesn't come from nowhere. Get back to the first slide here. All right, so this is the first list that you ran to that showdown, Bobby?
Yes, this is the first list, and I think like the thing that really stands out to me about this first list is all the 1-drops, the extra Death Star Stormtroopers, the TIE LNs. Like, we're not running those in our current list. Essentially, I didn't expect anyone else to be on Jango, so I didn't have to worry about opposing pings. But when Jango becomes a popular list, you really don't want X1s, in your entire list. I played against a Cad Bane deck that day, and I had to side out like 8 cards because I just had to sign out all the 1-drops. So we have a little bit more resilient of an early game, but the core of the deck, those cards that John mentioned as being like the 44, are really solidified here. And then what happened was after this event and my feedback, and then we got more games, and also taking into account that we know that the Jango is going to be part of the meta. John and Alex, along with just the team playtesting, made some excellent improvements and like really took the deck to a completely like a level that hitherto undreamt of, I'll say.
Bonus points for a hitherto, just missed into the conversation. But I think that's a good point. I mean, you have Jango being an important deck in the meta. You have Cad being an important deck in the meta. You have Quinlan, I think, being an important deck in the meta. Things with 1 health are not necessarily in a great spot.
No, not ideal.
All right.
Yeah, and like I think the Stormtroopers and TIE Fighters, that might have been something that I pitched at the very beginning. The way that we looked at it at first, and the way that Mike played it early on was like, okay, the old Boba deck could like play ISB or Daring Raid turn 1, use Tarkintown, untap a resource, and still play a 2-drop. So I'm like, well, we can't do that. So what do we do? And I was like, well, why don't we just play more 1-drops? And then after Mike played, that way, he had some feedback like, okay, maybe all these 1-drops aren't super great for XYZ reason. And that's kind of where we evolved into the list that I played at the Star City event. And Alex played almost the exact same list, and he got top 4. So like we could have very easily just finished first and second. But he and Wu were testing and figured out that Crafty Smuggler is extremely good into the expect meta of like Cad and Quinlan and Jango Mirrors because it has a shield. So ideally you want to go like Cad Bane, or not Cad Bane, but Crafty into like 7th Fleet so these decks just can't kill your units. And that's
Yeah.
just kind of where it went.
It's exactly how I took what Poem had been doing way back with mono yellow and sort of just said like, okay, I'm just gonna stop everything else other than I'm just gonna play shielded units and pump and attack, and that resilience is shown here. And then also in a more defensive way, the crafty smuggler gets to attack something twice and tap it down,
Right.
with Jango's ability. So like you can also play a little bit more control with it, whereas anything with 1 health is not going to be able to tap 2 things.
Yeah. So going deeper into this list in particular, it's like what I call the flex slots. And, these are cards that I changed every day that I played this deck at the event. Was like, the Force Choke, the Merc Gunship, the Waylay, the Interceptor, the TIE Advance. Like those 5-6 cards are like, probably the flex slots. Something that you don't necessarily need. It's just you try to figure out what the meta is, and then you just jam the cards in that are good into that meta.
Okay. And then let's take it to the next step. You just had a 1K last week.
Yeah, I had a 1K this past weekend, and I went undefeated in Swiss, and we split in the top 4 to go get Chinese food with a big group of people. I couldn't put 10 people on the back burner while I tried to get the win, even though I wanted to see if I could do it. But as you can see, very similar to what Jod had going on. We added K.T.O.D to the main deck because he was such a blowout in games that went long. He can answer other K.T.O.Ds. He answers Avenger, which is like nuts. I had the Van Braces 2, which we didn't mention in the previous slide, but like is a really interesting tool for Jango, and even just like putting pressure on the ground arena. And then I also added a sneak attack, which allows you to like do an early turn 3 TDR, grab a raider, it bounces back to hand, and you get to sneak attack it next turn and attack for even more damage, and you get the death trigger and everything. It's just like completely bonkers. There was one game I won, and I did well over 30 damage, and I didn't even need to flip Jango because I went on that line.
Yeah, there's a funny story about the Van Brace. So in Ohio, it was either me or Alex played someone like round 2 or 3, and after the match, he went to his friends and was talking very loud and animated. It was like, I'm in all the Discords, I read every forum, I'm on Facebook, and no one mentioned Van Brace, and here it is. And like we just couldn't help but laugh. It's like the card is a lot better than I gave it credit for. I was really stubborn on Friday and didn't play it. And then after Alex just badgered me for hours about it, I was like, fine, I'll play it Saturday. And it was just incredible. It's, we'll talk about it more later, but it's
I was the same way. I just refused to believe that it could be good.
Yeah,
and it's a good point when you're testing too. I mean, there is some degree of directions, but there's trial and error too. I mean, if it's a card that could make sense, I mean, here you've got all sorts of theme indicators too, right? Because it's a flamethrower on a Fett, so it would make sense if it's good. I'll note that, I mean, Jango unit is red, right? So it kind of makes sense to me that this color combination is what they were thinking of.
And Jango, like the Van Braces, you can tell that the design was there for both. Like they had to have taken that into account because it really softens up a unit for being overwhelmed with the Jango unit, and then obviously with Jango leader, it can tap up to 3 guys just on its own, and 4 if he attacks someone. So,
and that's a take that would be impossible to realize when the Van Brace was revealed, right? Because the Van Brace was revealed before Jango leader, I think.
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah, is Jango is Van Brace is set 1? I don't even know.
No, I think it's set 2.
Van Brace is a set 2, and
right.
Jango's a set 3.
So
yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where all of us talking heads, we gotta kind of reanalyze from time to time because something may come in, and all of a sudden that card's pretty good. Like Java unit is great now in set 3 because I mean they kind of filled in the rest of the underworld and the tricks, and now there are 2 of them. So
I will hipster myself on Java. I was playing Java in mono yellow set 1 like it was cool, digging for waylays and missing.
I had Jabba in my CAD decks,
Yep.
for a while too, and then, but yeah, getting now there are two of them with a unit that has 8 health is also kind of okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that these lists too, like Mike went 5-0 to 6-0 in his 1K, and then
Yep.
over Friday and Saturday I went 14-2 with Jango, and then in the very first event I think Mike went undefeated.
Yeah, I went 4-0. It was just a
Yeah.
regular showdown. I went 4-0.
So,
I actually haven't lost
very
with the
good
deck at that store. I'm
Yeah.
10-0.
Right, gotta get a T-shirt that says that.
Pretty
So-
good results.
So while this is still in your brains, here's what I really want to ask you guys: is when you're kind of starting and you're trying to perfect a deck, to bring to an event, doesn't matter what the deck is. I mean, it's a CCG. What are we thinking about when we're evolving like this? What kind of feedback are you looking for? How are you deciding what changes to make?
I mean, for me, it's just as easy as how many times did I resource this card instead of playing it in a matchup where I would want it, typically. Um, you know, After the event, we usually do like a team breakdown, like, okay, what cards worked, what cards didn't. We get ideas from the rest of the group, and kind of just take it from there.
Yeah, and I think like being, going to events, like I think I play a lot more locally than a lot of the guys on the team because I like getting out there and I like putting the cards on the table and seeing how they feel. But also not being results oriented and figuring out like, all right, all these 1-drops feel really bad. I'm winning these games, but not because like I need to understand like the real reason why I'm winning these games, which is like mainly on the back of casting as many ruthless raiders as I can, not any of this other stuff. So like being able to self-evaluate and figure out like what isn't working in the list, even though you're winning, can be difficult. The very first game I played of this deck, I like used that card. It's the one cost discard a card from their hand, but you have to discard one of yours. And I had the Kylo Silence
Unmask.
and unmasking the conspiracy, and I was like, oh, I've got this, and like that was one of the very first cuts. Even though I had like the wombo combo, you got to understand that it's inconsistent and you want consistency. So I look for things that bring consistency to the list. And that's why the things that are very consistent about what the deck wants to do, things like ISB Agent, things like P38, things like Surprise Strike, Ruthless Raider and TDR, obviously, but they're going to stay 3-ups because I want that consistency. And then, you trust in your teammates to tell you the spice. And that's why you run things like the Heavy Persuader tank and the Cad Bane in the main deck. So really just looking for a nice mix of like, all right, let's get these solid cards that are really good, and I want to draw every single game. And then because we have a card like Triple Dark Raid, what are some toolboxy things we can do? What are our problem cards, and how do we best deal with our problem cards? And that's how we got, as we said, from 3-1s and 2-1s to Crafty Smugglers.
Very good. All right, well, let's talk about the man himself, Jango, the leader. I think everybody knows the card. He has the ability to just tap by having a unit do damage. So how do you, first off, compare him to Boba as far as how the decks work?
Well, you really can't, right?
Yeah, that's not a fair comparison. Poor Jango.
Yeah. But like the main thing for me that sets Jango is like his 7 health. There aren't very many 7 health leaders that deploy for 5, right? There's like Quinlan, there's Jango, and then like I don't know if there's anyone else.
No, there's Tanway who flips at 4.
True.
Or Nalase.
Nalase.
Right.
Nalase.
Wow. I can't believe I did that.
But
So embarrassing.
so 7 health is great. So once you can flip him, he's usually there for a couple turns at least, maybe if not the whole game, because you have to deal with your board. He has good stats or good traits. If you want to play toward like the bounty hunter trait, there's things you can do. Same for Underworld. But he's just solid overall. Great stats, great ability. There's not much to say.
Yeah, and I just like on his other side, his leader side, his trigger is once per turn when a friendly unit deals damage. You can exhaust an enemy unit. What I love, about leaders is when they have a triggered ability. So you can use his ability even if you've claimed. they kill a P38 and all of a sudden you tap something down. They didn't see that coming. And you get to be a little judicial about what you decide to exhaust. So, you don't have to exhaust the very first thing that you hit. You can save it. You can just sit there with, an ISB agent waiting for them to flip their Sabine, and you don't have to do any. You can hold that back. So he's very versatile in his leader ability. And then, of course, when you do get to flip him, all hell breaks loose. You can tap down as many guys as you want, as many as you can, and it's completely out of control. That's what makes the Vam Embrace flamethrower so good, being able to hit multiple guys potentially.
Right, because it only needs to be 1 point of damage, and anything that comes off of a unit works.
Right. Correct.
Yep. So Vam Embrace will tap everything it does a damage to.
Yep.
Barrage
and you get to choose.
Yep. If you put 1 point
Yeah.
into it, it can get the whole board.
Yeah. So like ISB attack, Bayesian attack, crafty smuggler, shield attack, just all these things.
But when he's flipped, P38, like run him into something, it dies. You ping something on the ground, and now all of a sudden you've tapped two things.
Yeah.
It gets crazy.
I've seen it do 3 with ECL. I mean, where it actually did
Sure.
when played, and then it died into something that it attacked into a Star Destroyer, and then it actually hit something on the ground. It is a
Well, we'll talk about it, but the tank can also get 3 or more things tapped off of just one card because of the exploit.
Right.
How often are you getting off the leader side? How often are you using that, would you say?
Well, it's tough, right? Like, just if you're thinking about the sequence of turns, like you want to protect your leader, you often don't just flip him out and put him out there to get attacked. So a lot of times it's like, all right, well, let me make sure I exhaust something on the ground to clear the way, or I'm taking as many actions as I can. And then, the follow-up turn, it's really about reading the board, but I've tapped, upwards of 2 to 3 guys pretty commonly on the 6 resource turn.
Yeah.
And to your point, I think that in the middle of the discussion, leaders that you can just exhaust without paying something, are a lot better in my mind than the activated abilities.
Oh yeah, just mathematically. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we Boba was so good at the beginning, even when we didn't really know how to use him that well. It was free and it was triggered.
Right. Quinlan's like that, Cad's like that, where
Mhm.
you can just kind of go through it. You can order it that way too. All right, so this is a triple dark raid deck. Obviously, the card is great when it works. You're looking for the 6s with this?
Yeah.
I think there's one card we're really looking for, and everything else is gravy.
Right. Yeah. It's always Ruthless Raider, but there are times where the tank can just win you a game.
Yeah, Fire Spray can also when you need to
Fire
do.
Spray's fine. It's just there's just certain cards that are okay.
But yeah, it's all about Raider. The strongest thing about this, it digs 7 cards and it plays a vehicle from your deck for 5 less, and that means you get 7 looks for a Ruthless Raider. And if your opponent is thinking about what they're going to play, you can take a deep breath and relax, because they didn't hit Ruthless Raider. Because it's 9 times out of 10, probably 99 times out of 100, your opponent should just slam the Ruthless Raider. But so it finds you your best card. And then it's also extremely flexible. There are also plenty of times where I'm like, well, this is a control matchup. What I really need is a TIE Phantom. So I'm going to drop the Phantom. I'm going to hit for 4. It's going to bounce back to my hand. I'm going to be able to replay it and have that thing for the rest of the game. So it can also be toolboxy, pulling a TIE Advance to buff a Raider or a Phantom or a 7th Fleet Defender. It can pull your Fang Fighter to make sure you take out that General's Blade before they attack. So it's just an incredibly versatile card. It lets you play things out of your deck. It's one of the only cards in the game that lets you do that, especially looking at that spread and at that powerful of a level. There's a reason now there are 2 of them doesn't let you play vehicles for cheaper, because vehicles in this game are completely, I would say, overpowered on a level most units aren't, especially through the mid cost of the game.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good point. If you haven't played Triple Dark Raids decks before, I mean, it's a lot of variability. It can be fun to pilot, I think. And then, that said, you only get 7, which is a weird number. I don't think any other card searches for 7, but they must have come to that at some point with, this is the right balance of not making it be too good, because it'd be busted at 10. It'd be too consistent.
Oh yeah, you'd never miss a 10. I mean, there are times I've fully whiffed, and then there are plenty of times where I only have one option and it's terrible, like a TIE LN. I've been there.
Yeah.
I guess like the thing that I try and focus on is like I'm not going to let that tilt me. Like I still get a ship. I can still make use of this. Unless I really literally hit no vehicles, I don't feel too badly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and
I agree.
it looks like you're between 22 and 25 vehicles in the deck, which I think is actually where they came around the math.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever just straight missed with TDR, not in like an actual event anyway. There were a few times where it's like, oh, I just get this 7th fleet, but I never just like straight whiffed.
That's okay though. I mean, if you have a 7th fleet
Yeah.
defender that you drew, it's probably doing 3 damage or it's killing something.
Yeah, exactly. Like you always get to get something out of it, either 3 damage or a trade.
Yep.
And it's safe to cast this as soon as you're on 4 for this deck.
Yeah, I mean, I've cast it on 3 before if I have multiples.
Exactly. Yeah, if I have multiples, for sure.
Yeah, kind of just depends on what's in your hand and how the game's shaping up. But like, it's anywhere from like ideally, yes, like on your 4 resource turn is when you want to play it. But it's also great on like any point of the game from 4 resources on.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what you mentioned you're looking for. This was our spoiler set 1, so I'm attached to this.
Was it really?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Ruthless Raider, it's a late night ship. So.
Yeah, I mean it's the best ship. I mean,
they gave us a doozy. This thing's busted and has been, right?
And it just Jango put it on a completely new level. But we always knew this card was busted. It was insane against control decks always.
Mm-hmm.
And it just never felt like it had the perfect deck. And now it does. Now it has like the literal perfect deck for it to shine.
Yeah, I mean, it's been good since set 1. I mean, set 1 Vader decks were playing it. Set 2, decks were playing it. It just, it dodges takedown. It dodges fell the dragon. Like decks are literally playing Vanquish just for this one card.
Right.
And it's like,
and they still eat incredible. 2 damage from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And it's just, this is how you beat every control deck. This is how you beat every aggro deck. It's just how you beat every deck. It comes down, it exhausts something, it attacks for 4, and it always feels bad when they have to kill it because it just does it all over again for free.
Yeah, and then you just go dig out a new one.
Yep.
And I think the cool thing about it with this deck is you're getting kind of double value of it multiple ways, right? Triple Dark Raid kind of doubles its on it when played, right? Because
Yep.
presumably cast it twice. Sneak Attack definitely does. I mean, you get automatically 4 damage with a Sneak Attack Ruthless.
Yeah, it's 8 damage, and it's probably killing something. It's definitely tapping something. Like I said, it's just the perfect deck. It is the perfect Ruthless Raider deck. Like I just been waiting for the deck that put this card over the edge because, like John said, we knew it's been good from the jump, and this is it. And I think it was one of the first things I mentioned when we started recording. Just like this is the card.
Yeah.
All right, you're only allowed 3 though.
Well, not really. I mean, you can only play it 3 times, but you have a bunch. You get to, I'm sure there's some function that would represent how many you're actually playing when you get to look at 7 cards multiple times a game.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually have Palpatine Return Ruthless Raider on multiple occasions because that's something for Kylo and Vader.
Hell yeah, maybe that's the next iteration of this deck. Just Palp's Return for 8.
All we need is a. There you go. Let's go. All right, P38. This is another kind of design for Jango card. How would this play for you guys?
Yeah, so this is my favorite card in the whole set. I don't know if it's the best card, but it's my favorite card. It goes in Palp. It goes in so many decks, but in this deck and in particular, it's like no good to me dead with major upside. Like it's just incredibly good. It pings for Tarkintown. It exhausts leaders. It does so much.
Yeah, you can't believe a 3/2 is this good. But we've seen it before. When defeated triggers are really, really strong in this game, and being able to get this guy, coming and going, tapping and killing, it's just incredible. He's just the ultimate role player. Absolute, best new card for this deck and many decks.
All right. Surprise Strike.
The GOAT.
Yep.
So,
Pretty much one of those things where, to quote Woo, never cut surprise strike. It just goes in every yellow deck kind of as a mainstay. It's always going to be part of the core 50.
yep. And I think that's why we had it here. I mean, because
Yep.
I've been guilty of it myself. Oh,
I've got my
you get-
Woo signed
Oh, I gotta have
surprise strike in my deck.
There we go.
There you go. Never cut surprise strike. Yeah, I mean, it's just the best rate, right? 3 extra damage. It gets it. Obviously you hit face with that, and it's incredible. But it's also sneaky at just like being able to take out a Bright Hope. It lets a lot of things kill a Bright Hope. Lets you kill units. It lets you like shorten the race. It's just an incredible card.
Yep, it can be reach. It can be removal. Yeah, and I've been guilty of like dialing back on surprise strikes and regretting it later myself. So.
No,
well, there's people a lot of the times that just think that you always have to go face with it, but like Mike said, I mean, there's plenty of times where I sent like a P38 into a Bright Hope, and then taps something else down with the undefeated trigger.
Mm-hmm.
All right, no good to me dead. This is another core card for the deck.
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever see myself cutting it. It's good against every deck. I mean, I think Alex was even playing 3, but it's just one of those cards that will remain very good. It's the only card in the whole game that can tap a leader for 2 turns. So.
Yeah, and you would think, when I first started playing the deck, I was like, do we really need the thing that the whole deck is doing? But when you think about, Jango only gets his ability once. This is a really cheap opportunity to do this. You can often play, like the Vambrace Flamethrower, or you can do your TDR and play something that only costs 3. Like you can often do 2 things and hold this up, and you're not feeling bad about, tapping down a leader after they put a lightsaber on it, or just saving yourself 16 damage from a Poe or a Wrecker. It's just the ultimate utility card. And because you get it to go into the next turn, you don't have to worry about, I really need to claim early and take priority to do a Jango and tap. So even though it seems redundant, one of the things that is so great about this deck is that it just does the same thing over and over. Instead of redundancy, it's actually consistency. And this card makes that tap effect like ultra consistent and lets you stay on your game plan with or without initiative.
All right, let's kind of get some of the spicier includes. So
always be persuading. Never ever stop persuading.
Hey,
So this, I'm gonna shout out Mike on this one. This was a Mike Jim special. Like I had ATSD in the slot for a while. I also was playing like other random ground vehicles, and then I think Mike was like, "Well, why don't we just try this tank?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know about this one. but the more we tried it and the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? Like, this exploit trigger is actually kind of broken, and sometimes it's better than what the actual tank does. So,
what do you mean?
Yeah,
it's pretty sick. So, like, there's a lot of times where you can exploit like a Raider or a P38. You can check out the VOD from the top 4 of Columbus. I was playing against Phil, and he was playing Han 1 yellow. And I hit this tank off of a TDR, I think in all 3 games maybe. And like it just wreaked havoc. Like I would exploit a Raider, kill this guy, tap this guy, the 2 damage from this taps this guy, and like all of a sudden his board of like 3/5s and his leader is down to like nothing.
And they're all exhausted.
It's crazy.
You can see when John casts the TDRs, you just check the chat because BobbySapphire is saying tank incoming, always be persuading. I was like, here it comes. This is it. This is the perfect tank moment.
Were you flossing while you were saying that?
Absolutely, dude. I was so hyped for John. I actually want to like re-record commentary over those games because like they were so insane.
And I'll be totally honest. There was not one time where I'm like, man, I hope I hit tank here. I just like I just see it in the 7 cards, and I'm like, holy, like this is going to be amazing.
And that honestly happened to me the very first weekend where I played it, and I resourced it, and I was like, I was like, oh no. the tank would have been incredible here. I can eat the I can exploit the P38 and get this, and then tap down for the tank itself, and I can it's just, and then off a TDR you're also like hitting for 6, and that clocks them so fast. It's such a huge hit. This is, Loopy, you'll appreciate this because this is one of those times where it's like, all right, I'm just going to open the deck builder. I'm going to read every single card in these colors. I'm going to just see if I missed anything. And it's exactly what I did. It's like one of my favorite parts about card deck building. I just like came across this card. Don't remember ever seeing it or thinking about it a single time. And I just read that it did damage. And I was like, hell yeah, this is it. Let's try it. And it's been great. And some people play 2. I think we tried 2. I think it works really well as a one of. But man, when it's good, it's amazing.
I'm gonna need a tank signed by BobbySapphire. We'll have to hook that up.
All right, someone send me a hyper one.
Get piece persuaded. All right, Daring Raid is kind of a utility knife in this deck. How are you guys using that in this deck? Is this exclusively for base, or are you taking out units, or how are you?
It's kind of like a catch-all card, right? Like,
yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah, like it against the 25 health bases. A lot of times it just goes face. Is that a hyperfoil?
It's a hyperfoil Daring Raid. I just happen to have.
I have one too.
Nice.
I got.
I'll send it to you. I don't use hyperfoil.
Yeah, 25 health bases. It goes to face a lot because it's so easy to just chunk them with it. A lot of decks you resource it. A lot of decks you use it in conjunction with like a Raider or a P38. I don't think the Polish people, like the group there with the
swoop racers, they cut it. Yeah, they cut it, and they're on 12 events, which we can talk about maybe if we loop back to like the overall deck construction, where we feel pretty strongly, and I think like John pioneered this, but like making sure you had at least 15 events. Possibly Chrono too, because Chrono was worked on this deck with in set 2 and set 1 a ton. And Daring Raid, what it does is, like John said, it's a catch-all, but it, in a pinch, it triggers your Tarkintown, right? Like in a pinch, you leave that one resource up, and your opponent has to think, like, oh, am I dead here? Do I have to make a bad decision? You can see that actually in your game with Phil, John. Like he had to make a claim, trying to play around everything, and a 1 cost 2 damage to base is one more part of the calculation that's really hard to say. Like, well, I haven't seen him play it. It's really good right here. Like, what do I do? And you kind of force your opponent into making mistakes because you just have this thing that does everything you could possibly want. Finishes off something that otherwise could wreak havoc on your base, like a K2.
Actually, with this deck being in the meta, it's pretty good in the mirror too, right?
Yeah, it's great in the mirror. It's also really good into like ECL decks to like finish off the thing that they want to ECL. Yeah, I mean, it's just a catch-all card. There's really not much else to say about it.
It's good into Kira too.
Yeah, it's just anytime something costs 1, you kind of have to think like, is this fitting in? Because it's just so cheap.
All right, so let's talk about the flamethrower. Where are we looking for this? Where are we looking for this in the lines for Jango Tarkintown?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, it's a little tough because the 3 cost is a little problematic when you flip Jango. Like if you're thinking about, I really want a TDR, but when the ground is really gummed up, this thing, it can clear the ground, it can tap the ground, it can help you get through a sentinel on the ground that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get through. It like pings a shield off something and lets Jango kill it. It also just makes him a 4/8, which is absolutely formidable. That 8 health is huge. Hitting into him, he now trades with Akira. There's a lot of different things he does, but really it's just utility, right? Like in the same way that a lot of the cards we've talked about, they can hit face or they can deal with units. This is another one that does that. It gives him a little more punch, and it just gives a little more versatility to what Jango can do as a leader. It just turns him into a little bit of a monster, whereas like otherwise the 3/7 might be a little underwhelming.
Yeah, and if I wasn't playing this card on Saturday, I may not be sitting with you right now. It could just be Alex or something, God forbid. But it was like,
can you imagine?
Round 1 on Saturday, I played against this guy, super nice guy. he sat down with IG-88 and the droid base, like the 24 health droid base.
Let's go.
And yeah, and I'm like, man, this is probably going to be pretty easy. Like, this might be this guy's first tournament, but it turns out like he was very good, and he just wanted to try something cool. In game 1 on turn 3, like his 4 resource turn, he had 8 guys in play, 8, and I'm like, I mean, I can't win. So I boarded in the second flamethrower, and then in games 2 and 3, I basically mulliganed for it, and I just was like just roasting droids like the rest of the games 2 and 3 with the flamethrower.
Did you throw it on a crafty, or did you only put it on Jango?
I just traded the whole game and then put it on Jango. But it's very good for that reason. It helps you control these swarm decks. It helps you against like these mid-range hero piles like Quinlan. It's very good against Han 1. Yellow in particular. It's just a great card to help control the ground arena when you're otherwise all in space. There were games where I would play this on 5 and then just like take initiative just immediately. Do nothing else. And that might sound crazy, but when you can use your first action to just tap their entire board on your 6th, turn.
Yeah, you have free reign.
Yeah, it's brutal for them. They can't really come back from that.
So you need to combat the IG-88 menace. Find your flavor.
That's right.
You heard
Yeah,
it
it gives you reach. It's like a very simple card that gives you a ton of reach in an arena that you normally don't, right? Like we're usually not playing heavily in the ground arena, but that's also where a deck can take advantage. If you check out the K.T.O.D video from last week where me and Justin did a matchup deep dive on Jango versus Sabine, like he was successfully going wide against me. And that was pre-Vambrace Flamethrower, and that would have been a card that would let Jango, kill 2, maybe even 3 things on the ground, and really stabilize that board. So it's just a really great utility card. It's a one of, and it works in a lot of different situations, and it's not so expensive that you can't play 2 things in the same turn if you need to.
Right, and it could save you like 10 plus damage in a turn, and that's just insane for a 3 resource investment.
Right, it kind of fills the same role that Outmaneuver did in some of these builds too.
Right,
exactly.
Gum up the whole ground arena. All right, one of the most annoying cards in SWU, Vizina Tal. It's in the sideboard for both of you.
Yep. She's kind of I think Michael agrees. She's kind of like an extension of the main deck. Like I feel like she comes in pretty much every matchup. It's just it's hard to explain. I'm sure he can do it better, but
I can tackle that a little bit. Her utility is amazing, but her stats and her body isn't necessarily exactly what we're looking for. But what I do, and what I did that first weekend especially, is I'm always thinking about when I'm sideboarding is like, what do I want to take out? What's bad in this matchup? That's way more important to me than like fitting in good cards. And so like the first thing I would do is I would take the 2 Bazines out of my sideboard and put them right in the front and be like, okay, I am going to bring these in for whatever the worst cards in my deck are in this matchup. And then not only that, but she's still a fine turn 1 play, because oftentimes our opponents, or even us as players, we want to keep our entire curve in our hand, right? We want to have a 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, 5-drop. We get the perfect hand, right? Well, here Bazine comes and she takes out the 1 card that you have for the turn, and then you're bricked for the turn. And that gets us so far ahead because we're going to Tarkintown the next thing, because we're going to run Bazine into whatever you play and then Tarkintown it.
And
so like
awesome.
if it came into play ready, we could do that. But like she's gonna her body's fine, but her ability's amazing, and it's the only smuggle card we have too. So we can feel fine using it as a resource, and then if we're in a really bad situation, or like our opponent is very clearly representing like an ECL Poe or a Luke Skywalker, well then we can just Bazine out of the row and make sure they can't do that, or clear the way for something else. So she's the perfect card. She's actually like I think my favorite card in all of set 2. I think she's like potentially the best card in all of set 2 also. Just like very sneakily doing everything you could ever need. It's just not an effect we need game 1. We want to be a linear attack deck. And then what we can do in set 2 is, in games 2 and 3, is kind of like sit back and be like a little more cagey about how we go about ending the game.
And I think actually watching that video that you and Justin did, you actually sideboard some between the play and the draw as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's an important thing to think about. When you're on the play, being able to Bazine their first turn play, especially against a Sabine, can be really like a huge detriment to them in terms of like, your damage on base when you're playing a 25 health base like we are with Tarkintown.
Yeah, and like the thing with Bazine too is you really have to learn when to time her and play her, right? So like a lot of times you want her for the control matchups, and the one card that really kind of gets you is Snoke. So a lot of times you don't even play Bazine, like you just stash her in your row and you keep her until they're like 7 or 8 resource turn. Same thing for like Vigilance, right? Maybe a lot of times you'll want to play her on like their 6 our turn to take their Vigilance. It's just, timing her is one of the biggest parts about playing her.
Yeah, and then also being courageous enough to not resource her in matchups where you need to do 2 things in a turn. Maybe a more aggressive deck where you want to actually use her as a 2-mana spell and get the body on the board, and then follow it up with maybe a Kylo's TIE Fighter or another 3-drop ship because you don't want to pay that 4 because we generally don't want to resource to 7 in this deck.
Right.
Oh, makes sense, and I think that the timing is shared. It's Bazine, Spark Rebellion, similar, Force Throw.
Yeah.
Has some timing aspects to it, when to hit the hand. But you did a good job of explaining some of the big points. Trying to get ramp, I think, is important too. I'll think about that.
Yeah.
On green, if you can ever hit resupply or the
Yep.
super laser deck, that can just.
Oh, I mean, yeah, and I love against Han Solo decks. They drop a resource and then you Bazine them and you take their only play. It's so backbreaking for them. You basically took 2 cards.
Right. All right, so let's finish the card section with our boy Wolf.
Yeah, the man.
But you guys, there's a spaceship that does the same thing.
There is. We've had this discussion a lot, and honestly, John posted his list in our team chat this morning, and it had Tri-Fighters in it, and my jaw was on the floor. I couldn't believe he betrayed me and had Tri-Fighters in, because once he convinced me on Wolf, I was like, how could you even go back? Man, Wolf is a 2-mana spell, like a 2-resource spell that lasts for the whole turn. They can't heal. And man, I played Bosk Blue at my 1K this past weekend. And my opponent, Eric, is a really great player. And he exhausted his client to bounty something for 5. And I just slammed the Wolf down. And he played, and then he played a top target, slammed my other Wolf down. You just disrupting their entire plan is so great. Whereas Tri-Fighter, Vigilance kills Tri-Fighter and still gets to heal 5. That's the best heal card in the game. They can even they can put the top target right on the Tri-Fighter and still heal 9 with their Vigilance. It doesn't stop what you want it to stop. And even though you can pull Tri-Fighter with triple Dark Raid, and it can be a pain in the butt, John's going to tell me he's going to put the Tri-Fighter out after they play the top target, which is, very smart. But it's still, if they have that Vigilance, they're still going to heal their 5 off killing the Tri-Fighter. So I love that Wolf lasts for the turn. And then he has Sab also, so he can get in there. If they don't claim right away, sometimes you can just say, you know what, I'm just going to claim. I'm going to hit him again. I'm going to hit him for 3, and they're not going to heal next turn either.
He's got Saboteur
Yeah,
too, so he can always hit the base.
Yeah.
Or he can kill something.
I don't really have a good counter argument. Like everything that he said is absolutely correct. No argument. I could say that. Ooh,
this is a really bad episode of Crossfire, guys.
You can get Tri-Fighter with TDR. It's like, yeah, you can, but you don't want to.
Yeah.
Right. I was trying it out mostly because other people are trying it out, so I kind of wanted to see, okay, if other people are playing it, let me see what I think of it. I don't like to just judge other people's lists based on their results. I kind of try myself. And it's good. Tri-Fighter, the 3 health matters a lot. Not in the case of Vigilance, of course, but it matters that it can't be daring rated. It can't be perilous. Whatever it's called.
Position.
Yeah, it can't be make an opening. It's harder to kill. So it does have some merit. I would never fault someone for playing either of them. Like I think right now with Bosk being popular, you have to just pick one and just own it.
Yeah, particularly
kinda
if you're
go
not
from
running
there.
confiscates, or I've seen
Yeah.
the Fang fighters kind of come in and out of your list as they've evolved. I mean,
Yeah, but again, like it's another timing thing, and it kind of what sets apart like the good Django players from those people like kind of copying decks and not really playing a ton is like it's a timing thing, right? You always want to play these cards after they set up their big heel turn, like after
Right.
they use client, after they play their top target. That's when you want to slam like the Tri Fighter and Wolf to like throw off their entire turn.
In fact, this guy's devastating against client because
Right.
I mean that's
Yeah.
one that confiscate can't hit. You can't get rid of the client bounty with confiscate.
Right.
And he
And
actually
like
prevents a threat to the client the next turn. Right?
yeah,
It's
and
conceivably
Tri
surprise
Fighters
strike.
the same way is like, after they set up their heel turn, they have to kill your 3/3 space unit, which like they don't really want to do, and then they have to kill the thing that they bountied. So
Right.
And-
Yeah, and I was giving John a little bit of a hard time. I do see the merit to the Tri-Fighter, but I do love how cheap Wolf is and his lasting effect in my matchups against Bosk this past weekend were paramount in me winning those matchups.
Right. All right. Well, that's actually a great segue to matchups, which is the final part of the masterclass. Let's talk about the matchups. First off, Sabine, which I think is the leader out the gates for aggro. You did a good video on
Yeah.
this for one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll plug the video again if you haven't checked out K.T.O.D. Deck matchup deep dive on Sabine versus Jango. Me and Justin really get into it. We play a 3-game set, and then we narrate over the games where we kind of like just not necessarily break down what's happening in the games, but talk about the matchup and using the games as examples.
And I will say, I really liked that format. It was really good that you guys took the time to go back and dub after and kind of go through the thought process.
We recorded that with that in mind, actually. So like we knew we were going to do that. We took notes throughout the game, and we've gotten a lot of amazing feedback on it. It didn't get the most hits out of all our videos, but man, everyone who watched it and gave us feedback, it was all incredible. Some people, Nick Cuenca, no stranger to making content, said, "This is the best card video I've ever seen." So that was high. That's high praise. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think it was, well done by Justin, and it was a great idea by him, and I think it was really great. But that matchup is really about, going wide is a great strategy. Using buffed units, like Justin's really high on General Donna right now to sort of like buff out of range of things like, a daring raid killing anything, or taking priority and putting a very high priority on Rebel Assault to make sure you get the damage in. They're playing Bright Hopes, which our deck does a really good job of dealing with one Bright Hope, but the second and third Bright Hopes can be a real problem. So I think there's a lot that goes into that matchup. I think it's a pretty even matchup, and I think like you could even say Sabine might be favored in that matchup. But this deck, I don't know. Do you feel like you're a huge dog to any matchup, John?
no, I don't think the deck's a huge dog in anything. Like the best way that I kind of describe this is like I think this Django deck is favored into everything. But it's not like overwhelmingly like Boba was, right? Like Django might be 55-60% favored against the field. Bosk can be tough. Like I wouldn't say that we're really favored there, but I mean otherwise it's pretty solid across the board. Just talking about Sabine, like I think that's probably one of your 50-50 matchups. If you're better than your opponent, as in like the lines, you're more versed in the matchup than they are, you're probably closer to like a 60% to win. But it's just one of those matchups. It's always back and forth. If they use UCL properly, it's harder. If they have Bright Hope, it's harder.
Try to hit your
Just things
ruthless
like that.
on the triple dart.
Yeah.
That'll help.
I was trying to find it real quick, but before my event, I just knew that there'd be Sabines in my field because Massachusetts always has a bunch of Sabines. And John, he told me like, you wanna take time to make a trade, like at some point in the game on the ground, so they can't get ahead and just keep pushing damage and really like focus on the tap downs, but make sure you make one extra trade that you may not make in another matchup to make sure that you're taking their damage off the board, because your damage is going to come no matter what in the form of TDR.
Yeah, it's a weird matchup, and in the way that like Jango is definitely the control player for the first like 3 turns of the game. Like your two, 3, and 4 resource turns are always about like, hey, what trades can I make that make sense? What damage can I sneak in? How do I not get chunked for 8? Like just things like that. So it's all those little side games. And then around your 5 resource turn, like your flip turn, is when you really start to turn the corner on them and can outrace them. Like Jango can do like 11, 12 plus damage a turn starting on like your flip turn. So those are the main lines that you want to look for. And the main thing is like you never want to take like 5 plus damage from their leader. Sometimes it's hard to avoid. You'll see in my stream match in top 8, I played against a Sabine player, and I tried really hard game 1 to not get hit by a Sabine leader, and then I got blown out by an ECL K2, and that was on me because I left my Greedo there, and that's something that players want to do as well, is try to trade your Greedo off as soon as possible. Trade it into a Marine, trade it into
Yeah,
anything
you don't want
that
to
you
walk
can.
into an E-Cell overwhelm from
Exactly.
K2 or Wrecker.
Right. And that probably cost me the game.
Yeah, but on the same token, like I think the very next game, you made an insane attack with Jango that basically made it so he couldn't overwhelm kill you. He was always going to be
Right.
one short off the Wrecker ambush, and
Yeah.
the commentators and the chat didn't see it, but like it was very clear that the only thing you were doing was making sure you didn't die to Wrecker.
So he put himself below 5 health so that Wrecker couldn't.
Yeah.
Basically.
That's a big thing.
So I just put 3 damage on
It's like
Jango,
how when you're playing
Yeah.
Han 2 blue that you want to actually bring OB in with 4 health as opposed to 6 so you don't get Wrecker for 6.
Yeah, I won an insane game in a showdown with Ray where I was right up against it. I flipped my Ray. I attacked with my Ray. I healed the 3, and then I immediately rivals followed by Ray.
Is there going to be more Blu-ray content coming?
Yeah, there's always going to be Blu-ray content coming. I mean, I don't know if people want Blu-ray content, but I'm always working on Blu-ray. I still think that deck is incredible, and I'm actually working on some mono blue Kira as well. So
nice.
Lots of mono Bobby content.
Yeah, Poem's been working on mono Yoda, too.
Nice.
So there's lots.
I wish I could figure that out. Maybe I'll hit him up.
But yeah, I mean that's how the Sabine matchup goes though. It's just look for those early trades and then turn the corner.
Yeah, I'll confess. I've goldfished a lot into Jango and Sabine because I'm testing stuff, and those are the 2 decks that I test against, but I haven't run them against each other all that much. Makes sense to me. I did think that the video that Justin and Bobby did, I hope that there's more of those.
And always try to win the die roll. That makes it considerably easier.
That is good. Always win the die roll and always be persuading.
That's
always
right.
Be persuading. All right. What about Hero Blue Red? This could be Anakin. This could be Han. It could be Rey. It could be Chirrut.
So
let's not forget.
Okay, so Rey is really easy. Like I don't know how Rey could ever possibly beat you. Like the red ones especially, because they can't pressure you enough to put you in danger of dying, and by the time they're ready to flip their leader, you can just exhaust it, right? Like I played against 2 Reys. One of them made top 8 Saturday actually, but he deployed Rey on 6 obviously, and like I was able to exhaust it on his 6 and 7 resource turn. Like Rey just did nothing. And that's the main problem with Rey into Jango, is that like all of their best cards are like anti-ground stuff with village people and Rey herself, and like they just don't do anything against Jango. Whereas like Anakin can do things in space, like he can trade his restored arc for basically anything. Concord Dawn is very good in Anakin because it can kill something and still block. Like Obi-Wan's Aether Sprite is really problematic. So Anakin is harder. Rey is not.
When you played against the Rays, did they discard you at all? Because I do think the deck has like a little bit of a hellbent problem where it's like using all its cards, and it really opens itself up to getting like a really devastating pillage The deck top decks pretty well, but if you don't top deck well, like if you just top deck all your ISB agents, like you can definitely get run out of cards.
So the thing with the discard is like pillage is kind of a trap because you have to be ahead of Jango to really play pillage. Like otherwise Jango just doesn't care. Like because pillage isn't putting guys in play. Like you're still tapping their board. Like who cares? The discard that you really care about is like the cheap stuff, like Spark and Force Throw.
Yeah,
and
Force
things-
Throw and K2, I could see
Yeah.
like
K2.
leading up to like like them having initiative, they pillage us out of the game. So like I do think that there are potential lines that could be concerning, but I would say like I would like John's saying, like make sure you don't let them get ahead, and as long as you can avoid getting pillaged out of the game, you're probably fine.
Yeah, and like knowing that they could have pillage is a big thing too. Like a lot of times, if I don't have Raider in my hand, or like Fire Spray, like I just won't resource 6. Like you don't need 6 resources. Like
Right,
yeah,
until
you
you
can
hit
play TDR on 4 and still hit Raider. It's just like don't let yourself get blown out by pillage. Is the main thing. But the cards like Throw are very good against you. Yes.
And I think that's a good segue to Quinlan, which is a leader that I'm very hot on. This can be Tarkintown or ECL. I prefer the Tarkintown myself. But how are you tackling that? What's your view from the other end of the table?
One thing that I've been trying to do against Quinlan is not blow my my Tarkintown early, and to save it for like when they're trying to set up a Plo Koon. So I'll try and work a little bit harder at killing things naturally with a Greedo, with repeated pings, and really save the Tarkintown for like to make sure they don't rebuild for a devastating Plo Koon into my Jango. It's been working pretty well for me. And then also just making sure that you always have the tap down for if they do General's Blade. You don't really want to kill Quinlan. You don't really want to spend so much time like doing 7 damage to something. And then by not killing him, you're leaving his ping infinite essentially because all your stuff's pretty cheap. So it can be a little dangerous to navigate that matchup, but as long as you're hitting your bombs and he doesn't really have a great way to deal with Raider and Fire Spray unless he hits the Falcon from hand, which like is the only thing that's like really scary in the list.
Yeah, I mean, Mike pretty much summed it up and nailed it. Like the main cards you want into Quinlan are like Crafty Smuggler, 7th Fleet. Like those are like the ideal starters. P38 is really good early, even if you don't get a ton of value from it, because it kind of just stops their Falcon from doing anything. Because P38 can trade pretty cleanly into Falcon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I oftentimes won't tap down their leader unless it has a Journal's Blade, like because like a 3/7 doesn't really matter. It's just like navigating just the main cards.
I will, because I want to put some damage on him in case I have to kill him, like in case he becomes problematic. Like I really don't want to lose my bombs to a 6-drop Falcon.
And Quinlan's a lot better when he's deployed too, particularly against.
Well, that's
like this,
that's really
runs
the
a lot
issue.
Of small cards is that you can actually hit the Greedos really easily because any card played that has more than one, can hit it. So.
That's actually an insane spot where the Vambraces is amazing because the Vambraces does just kill Quinlan by itself. Jango plus Vambraces is 7 damage.
This is a matchup where the Vambrace really shines, and like Anakin's another one, Rey's one, like all those mid-range hero decks, like they kind of just live and die on the ground, right? With like Kanan, Plo Koon, like their leader.
Yeah, and if you think about your Jango the way like when you play against Wu playing Kira, and he's like, well, I'm just going to use Kira to delete your leader. Like in these matchups with Vambraces, if you can trade your Jango into their leader, like they'll never catch you.
Right.
Right,
because you don't need the multiple taps a turn. You just like one exhaust a turn is great.
I think that's right on point to what the opposite is. I think this is. It's hard to. I don't know if I have a strong opinion that anybody's favored. I mean, the matches can really go fast one way or the other. Somebody gets control and the other can't catch up. But I'm certainly
Yeah.
looking for spark and force throw.
Yeah. So like Quinlan 30, like the green 30 Quinlans can be kind of tough. Just because like I mean, I don't know. The game plays out kind of weird where like doing 30 damage to a hero deck sometimes is hard. So I'd rather play against like the, ECL and Tarkintown Quinlans, but they all play out kind of the same way. Like you always want the same cards against them, like Raider, Van Brace. Yeah, they're all the same.
What about mono yellow? I mean, I always thought that Boba yellow was in large part keeping Boba red, from getting serious.
Yeah. So I say this all the time is that like I think this deck is really good into the mono yellow decks because you can kind of neuter their cunnings to where they don't really do anything.
With Jango leader.
Yeah, there's like no other deck that can say that. Is like they could basically never give +4
Yep,
with cunning.
they literally can't. Yeah.
Yeah, and like oftentimes like just tap 2 guys and bounce something, you always just kind of shrug it off and like still tap their best thing, and cunning is kind of a wasted action. Like you'll see in my top 4 match against Phil, if someone goes back and watches it, is that like he played I think 2 cunnings in 2 of the 3 games, and like like almost every time his cunning did almost absolutely nothing, and it's just
and that was
it's
on
just
Han.
really resilient. Yeah, that was on Han. It's just
And
really resilient.
also, that deck wants to bounce everything, and like they can't bounce any of our stuff. It comes back even stronger. And then also, that's a matchup where we can totally save Tarkintown for like a tech or DJ turn. We don't have to Tarkintown anything early. There's like not a lot of pressure that they're going to put on us because of the exhaust. So it just like very naturally plays well into Han Yellow. And then what was the other thing I wanted to say? Nah, there was something else, but
But I
either
think
way.
that's a good point. I mean, Tarkintown isn't a turn 1 play against every deck, right?
For sure.
So
And that took practice to realize that.
Sabine has Fleet Lieutenant and Wing Leader, which highly incentivize you to make sure they don't have something going into turn 2.
Yeah, Sabine is a
Plenty of deck-
matchup where you want to kill their turn 1.
Right.
Definitely.
But that's not every deck. There's plenty of them
Right.
where you might be able to use it later to greater effect and take something that's hurting you more. Right. Makes sense.
For sure. Yeah, but the mono yellow decks, like there's Han, which I think you're favored against, and then there's Jango mono yellow starting to get kind of more popular now too, and I think it's kind of the same thing. Like as long as you can like make their cunnings bad, I think you're always going to be favored.
Yeah.
Right, and you do have kind of one of the better answers to cunning. So long as you have like even an ISB agent, you can handle.
Yeah,
the
like
thing that was gonna attack
your leader who is always in play is just an answer to cunning.
Yep.
So what about yellow-green villain? I don't know if this is Jango or CAD or what the meta will get to.
Yeah, it's probably Palp, if anything, right now.
Right. Yeah, Palp,
Palp just did a great showing in the UK, and I've been working a lot on Yellow Palp.
Shout out to Rando Mando, who took that.
Yeah, and
he
Rando
was
Mando,
the one
too.
in Columbus with Palp.
Yeah.
He's a
Yeah, he
Wisconsin
did
guy. Tim from Appleton. Great guy, but he's been playing Steal Your Girl Palp since set 1.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And it's good targets for Palp. Like, you don't want your Raider taken.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, for sure, or your fire spray. But it's like I played against a cat, and I played against a cat green and also a Jango green and Columbus over the 3 days, and I felt like they were not that hard. Like our deck is pretty resilient to overwhelming barrage, because the biggest things like fire spray and Raider, which have 6 toughness, and like yes, they can get like a 2-for-1 on your little 3/2s, but like you usually don't care, since that's really not how you're winning the game. Yeah, I mean since Boba's banned now, or suspended, I guess I should say, like there's really no fear of like these yellow green decks. do anything.
Yeah, I think
crazy.
like as long as you can focus on closing out the game and not allowing them to get over the top, because once they start dropping, like once they steal a raider and they start dropping like devastators and reinforcement walkers, like
Mhm.
obviously they can go much bigger than you can, and they can close out the game quickly with something like a maul or take over with Vader.
Right.
So I do think you want to stay on the attack and not dirtle too much, but by putting the deck puts a lot of pressure on, and then they don't really have a great answer to our space.
And be conscious of Cad Bane. I think that's the highest impact card from
like
set 3.
cards like that, you really like. Yes, you can play with it in mind, but you usually can't do anything about it. So I don't think you really like. At least me, like I don't change my lines most of the time due to like maybe they have Cad Bane unit or maybe they have Snoke. Like
Right.
you
Just
really
get the damage
can't-
in.
Yeah, you really can't afford to do that most of the time, because you have to use so many resources to like remove Cad or Snoke, like daring raid plus a random Tarkintown that's still around plus a P-38. Like it gets kind of crazy. So
Yeah, just tap them.
Yeah.
Redeploy some stuff. If you have the opportunity to get him, then you get your stuff back. Great, but he's not slowing us down nearly as much as like a Snoke.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a great transition to green blue.
Yeah, I set you up there.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
No problem.
Could be Pelp.
I've been doing this a while.
Could be Kira.
So green villain, like I mean, I think green blue villain, like I haven't played probably enough of them to form like a real opinion, but like Kira, I didn't find to be that difficult.
Everything's favored into Kira.
Right.
That is true. I will say, like
True.
me and Wu ran the match, and he was, that we kind of discovered that like devastating gunship was truly devastating.
Yeah.
And it was really wrecking us through ECL.
I was gonna say Hondo's not that bad into this deck.
Yeah, I could see that. Hondo has a lot of space and like
And the new
makes use of that 3-mana 2/2 or whatever.
Yeah, the gunship is great.
The gunship's insane, but then I think the night before my 1K, I think I like maybe went 5-1 or 6-1 against Kira, and I was like, oh, okay, that didn't feel as bad because you just
Kira?
Yeah, well, I was gonna throw him under the bus. Jeez. But yeah, I mean, I just you hit all your raiders and you just pile on that damage, and they don't have he doesn't have restore. Or I guess like they have some vigilances, but vigilance, in Kira when they have to pay 6 for it, is not it. So I think he even had top targets made when we were testing, and I was just able to pile on the damage and not take damage back. Like that's something that Wu's really good at with the deck, is like flipping the script and killing you a lot sooner than you think they can. And you can't do that with Jango. Like Jango just doesn't let someone do that.
Yeah, like it's all about Raider, but at the same time, it's like if you have an early Phantom, like they have to deal with it, and usually they have like 2 or 3 cards in their entire deck that can deal with it, and if they don't have it at that time, they're just getting chunked for so much, and then they use their resources to remove it, and then you play Raider, and it's just
Yeah, and we didn't talk about it earlier when going through the list, but like Phantom is so important, and so in these control matchups, and that's also like a testament to how like intelligent of a decision John made to put the advanced in the main deck, because that actually gives us some play into the control decks having perilous position and make an opening and stuff. And even this past weekend against Bosk, my opponent, like I played a Phantom and my opponent took an action, and I immediately claimed and TDR'd and hit the advanced, and the game was completely over from there. Even though he eventually killed the Phantom, it took him too long, and I did too much damage elsewhere.
Yeah. So most of the answers to the Phantom that they have can't hit it once it has experience. I mean, if it's on the villain side,
yeah, and we only right now we're only playing one advanced main, but we had full 3 in the 60, and it's not like Tarkin, where like Tarkin can beat those decks so easily, because all that he has to do is land a Falcon one time at one point, and then all of a sudden the Falcon's like an 8/8, right? So you do have to work a little bit harder, and you have to be a little more cagey. And I think if you look at the Blue Bosk that won the UK event, had 3 perilous positions main and 3 making openings in the board. So like, Pierre was not messing around. he did not want to lose to Phantom, but that was his one loss, right? It was against Jango. So,
Yeah.
Well, that's a good transition to Boss Blue.
dude, you should just hire me at this point. I am
Yeah.
on fire with these. It's almost like I do this professionally.
I know, that's right. So,
Yeah.
Boss, what are we trying to do to get over that matchup?
It's tough. Like Bosk is probably one of your tougher ones. But one thing that we have gone for us is that most of our deck, like 90% of our units, are non-unique. So their top targets usually don't get full value, which matters quite a bit. So like our Greedos and our Kylo's ties usually get resourced, and we just try to win with like, 7 fleets, phantoms.
Yeah,
Raiders.
definitely don't want to play Greedo. Definitely want
Yeah.
to cut the Greedos and bring in Bazines and Wolves.
Right.
And then, tap down client so he can't heal you,
Yep.
get in as much damage as you can. And like Bosk's still a control deck. It doesn't want to see Raiders,
Right.
Even post Snoke, like if you feel like your hand is totally dead to Snoke, like you don't just focus on hitting as many Raiders as you can, I guess. It's just like keep bouncing them back to your hand and replaying them.
I mean, it's really that simple. It's just like find as many Raiders as you possibly can. There was one game I won against Bosk where I had a Raider, was able to get him to like 26, 28 damage. He played Snoke to basically stabilize. Then I was able to use the tank to exploit 2 Raiders to deal the last 4 damage to him. And there's this like,
Always be persuading.
Yeah,
Always be persuading.
But you just want to look for lines like that late game against these control decks. Is that a lot of times you don't want to give them like another turn, so exploiting your Raiders to win the game is
and just staying aggressive. Like realizing that this deck really can pile on the damage.
Yeah.
All right, so let's not leave out the value decks on the hero side. Blue green could be Luke, could be Obi.
Yeah, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the Bright Hope can be a real problem in multitudes, and you really don't want to get them to the point where they can like General's Blade, Home One, completely take over the game with things like Home One and Ewing reinforcement, recurring or pulling Bright Hopes. But otherwise, it's sort of the same. I think like Luke could be slightly more problematic because of the constant shielding, but it also doesn't put any pressure on you. So like you can generally just run damage through them as long as they don't hit the multiple Bright Hopes, because you really can deal with the first Bright Hope fairly easily.
Yeah, and like Concord Dawn isn't really a huge threat anymore either, because again the P38 can just pretty much cleanly answer it, whereas Bright Hope makes you work a little harder. But now these decks are starting to play all those plus the Aether Sprite, which is really good against this.
And I've been surprised at how good that card plays. I mean, I thought it was, not great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that card is very good in a vacuum, but when the meta is just like a bunch of 3/2
3/2 ships, yeah.
then like it's just way better. Like I think if Jango becomes less popular, like that card will slowly fade away into sideboards. But
yeah, I've stayed strong on running Punishing One because I do hate all the 3/2s, and I did want some more 3-cost ships.
Yeah, and
I'm
like
still a
that's
big
why
fan.
I kind of went back to trying Tri-Fighters. I'm like, okay, it's a 3/3, so it kind of survives more of the stuff. But I don't think the blue-green decks pose too much of a threat because, like Mike said, like they're slow. They don't pressure you. You could tap their leader, and in the case of Luke, and of course, like Obi-Wan just does nothing because he's just a random ground guy. But it's their ships and multiples if they get shields that start to pose a threat, because then once they get to their home one turns, you just can't.
They're
once
going to
they
heal
start
out of
playing
it.
home ones and redemptions, it's going
Right.
to be a
Yeah.
hard road to hoe, I'd imagine. All right,
Yep.
so last one, pure ramp, double green, usually pale.
Yeah, I think they're probably just too slow, and they don't have any, like, they don't have space. Like, what are they going to do in space? They've got no ships.
Right, yeah, that's the main thing that I was going to say, is that like for villain especially, like they just have no ships. Like I mean, they can do absolutely nothing to you for the first like 5 turns of the game.
Kill them before they get to Devastator.
Yeah, I mean, which usually you can, as long as you can draw like even a single TDR. Fire spray is very good against them. So pretty much that.
Yeah, these villain decks just have no ships.
Right.
Unless they're red. All right, so let's wrap this up with tournament prep. Now, let's change it up. Both of you guys did master classes before, and thanks for coming back. We'll get you a repeat master class, T-shirt and lanyard.
Yeah, badge. Where's my badge?
Yeah, we'll get you a badge. I'll get you a badge. I gotta find. I don't know why there's not SCG cons ever by me. I'm hoping that they do one eventually. In Chicago or someplace.
Maybe
that'd be cool.
But rather than on how to prepare for a big tournament, which both of you answer, how do you prepare for the first part of a set? I mean, what are you thinking? Is you're hey, I got this event, but it's going to be a weekend or two weeks in. What's going through your mind as you're getting ready for that?
Well, for me, it's I think people might think that we just play all the time, but really we just talk more than we play. We just theory craft so much stuff, and then like Chrono, especially CJ, he'll just throw 20 decks at the wall the first week, and then maybe 1 or 2 of them might be good, and then we'll just test those and tune them. Or in the case of this Jango deck, it's well, why don't we just throw some cards in and try it? But it's just we have 8 people, so we just bounce ideas off of each other, and then
and this was always the case for me when in the Destiny days too, Loopy. It's just man, having a good team that you trust is so valuable, because I'm working 2 jobs, and I can say hey, what's good, what can I do, and everyone on the team has at least thought about something, or they have a fallback for me, they have something for me to do. So relying on the people you trust, or finding people that you could trust and team with, is a really good way to approach an early set, and then just honestly play stuff that you think is good, and put your ideas to the test. We're in a really great time right now where there's not a lot going on, but we have a slew of PQs coming up, right? And everyone's really hyped about PQs, but I think in a year we won't even care about PQs, right? So just don't overthink it. Play something solid. Understand what you're going to face, and have a plan for those decks. And that's really the best thing you can do. And don't be afraid to discover a little bit by trying something new, or trying something that someone else that you trust is saying is good. Get a few reps, practice, and put it on the table and see how you do with it.
Yeah, I will say, and I'm kind of throwing my own team under the bus here, but I will say that the first week of every set is kind of a mess, because you have to deal with CJ trying his Han 2 green deck. You have to deal with Wu trying his new and updated blue-green decks. Alex tries his Han 1 decks. Maddie tries his whatever.
Maddie tries 40 different decks. Because
he's got 100 decks.
After we get past that and realize everything is trash because I can't beat Sabine, then we can start getting in, to the real stuff. And we're at a really good place now where we have a somewhat established meta, and we've been working together to figure out ways to attack all the popular decks.
Yeah, and it's a real divide and conquer approach, right?
Exactly.
We've all got, now we're looping back to those things that none of those ideas that John just mentioned are bad. It's just without context, they're not as good as they could be. So how do we find a really good deck that allows us to win some games? And then, all right, now that a meta is established, how do we step back and figure out what's the best way to fight these? Because one matchup we didn't talk about, but the Jango mirror is pretty tough. It's a lot of math, and it's a lot of pinging, and it's a lot of taking initiative early so you can re-ping them and not get pinged back, and it's kind of messy. So I personally don't like mirrors. Some people do. So I'm always thinking all right, now that we've got the best deck, how do I go about beating it with something that's a little off the wall?
It's a great point, and I'm excited, guys. I mean, we had Chicago. We had 8 different decks make the top 8. We had 1 drop, so my wife snuck in as number 9 on Sabine because the OB deck had to go. OB ECL, unfortunately, wasn't able to stay for the rest, but it is cool seeing a variety of things happening, and I think that there's some factors to it.
Yeah, I'm really high on the game, and I'm really high on where it's at, and I know people are not super happy with the prizes, and I don't know how you could be, but also like I do think people forget that they didn't want to have any events, and they kind of are appeasing us. And I still have high hopes for what's on the way. And if not, at the very least, we're all going to get to go to Vegas this summer.
Yeah, Vegas, baby.
Exactly.
And I second what you guys said too about getting it out and getting community and people that you trust there. And I appreciate Chrono because he'll always call me out if I'm doing stupid stuff to Sabine. But he'll challenge it. Sometimes you agree with him, sometimes you don't. But you need people like that.
Yep. And you just and that's what's great about the K.T.O.D community is like you can be held accountable, and as long as you have a thick skin and you realize that it comes from a place of like let's all get better and let's all it's all win because we're all K.T.O.D, then you just roll with it and try and improve yourself.
Yeah, like that's the thing. It's like if Chrono or Justin or me or even Woo get on you hey, don't play this card. It's not we're calling you bad. It's just we want you to play the right cards and do the best you possibly can. That's it.
And then or you find the Vambrace flamethrowers and you make us eat crow.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. That's right too. And they'll admit they're wrong. Yep. Nope. I appreciate that. I appreciate it for all you guys do for the community and working your 2 jobs to make this thing happen, Mike. that is appreciated because it's a good place over there. For building. I hope that everybody has enjoyed the Jango Masterclass. I mean, I feel confident, looking at this deck now, and it's something that we're going to be sticking around for now. So, final thoughts as we close this masterclass. When we start with Tatta.
Yeah, I mean, I love this deck. It's my favorite deck. It's probably my favorite deck over all 3 sets, just because of the mental pretzel it kind of puts you in. It's great, and I'm really looking forward to evolving it going into PQ season. I will most likely be playing it through PQ season, at least the first handful. And yeah, I mean that's about it.
All right, take us home, BS.
Yeah, for me, I'll reiterate, what I said earlier. It feels like a real deck. It feels like the first real deck, other than Sabine, where Sabine's so adaptable. It can be so many things, and what TDR allows this deck to do is be so toolboxy, be so many things. You can be a Phantom deck, you can be a Raider deck, you can be a ground deck, you can do whatever you need to do to try and get the win. And I love this deck too, and I think it's really strong. I look forward to trying to find ways to beat it as well, but I also I'm really enjoying it, and I hope people are enjoying it too, and I hope people learned a lot.
All right, there you go, all you fetishists. We have some space for you, and we will see you as we go through set 3. We'll be looking for some more masterclasses soon. So if you watched this far, you're my hero.